Alright guys, I've been with my T7 now for 5 years. We have ridden 82,918 kilometers. We've been to 24 countries and ridden things that we should and ending up in places that we shouldn't have. I've fallen with this bike a gazillion times and I've made more mods than I've told my wife. So yeah, I have so much to talk about this bike now, and so it might be a long video. I'll make chapters and share links to everything because I expect a lot of questions, I guess. I have a few chapters that, yeah, I need this phone now just to remember everything. We'll go through who is the T7 for from my perspective, protection, what I've got, and modifications that I've done, and modifications that I would do as the first thing if I get a new T7, or anyone who gets a T7. Service and maintenance, damage and problems, and then some Q&A because you asked a lot of questions beforehand. So yeah, let's get started with that. So first of all, who is the T7 for? And I think it's a simplistic and reliable platform for adventure. So you don't buy this bike because it outperforms all the other bikes on the market. There's always other bikes with better suspension and more horsepower and more electronics. You buy it because the core of this bike is truly healthy. It's engineering that has been proven to be reliable, and geometry that really makes for some good riding. So it's not glitter on a turd in a way. And that's why this bike is perhaps the most modified bike on the market, because you can take it all the way to the Pultares super enduro machine, all the way to a comfy road train if you like. And my aim has been to make it a little bit more off-road worthy, because that's where I like to be, but no crazy stuff. So it's just a good set of genes to build on. And since the T7, a lot of other brands have followed with T7 killers, they all want to be. But from my end, I can honestly say I haven't really considered a different bike that, oh, there's a better one than my T7. I love I'm not sure what it is, the looks and the geometry. I just love riding this bike. And none of the other features that other bikes come with, from electronics to more horsepower or anything, has tempted me. So yeah, I don't need any spicing up this marriage, like a Touareg or anything like that. So let's walk around the bike. Okay, so protection-wise, no crash bars, never had them. For all my time with this bike, no crash bars, because I like it slim. And if it falls, it's protected by the handguards, because it keeps it above ground. Of course, there can be stones, there can be stuff. The stuff here can be damaged, but so far it hasn't. So 82,000 kilometers, and why start now? Instead, I have the engine covers just in case, GB Racing, and 4mm aluminum bash plate, because yeah, it takes a beating here. It's not the highest ground clearance. But other than that, I have no other protection. So modifications, I have the perfect fairings, sort of glass fiber front fairing, because my old one broke. It's quite brittle, the plastics, and I got a branch under here, and yeah, it's cracked and broke and everything. This is one piece. I sprayed it black, and yeah, it's much more sturdier, and it has more clearance to the actual tire. One thing that everyone should do is replace these bolts to nylon screws, because yeah, it's prone for hits and stuff. And if you break the stainless steel screw that comes standard, you have a hard job getting that out. And also it's steel screwed into aluminium so it can stick. If something happens here, the nylon screw just pops off, and it's easy just with a screwdriver to get it out. So suspension, and that's something I would do on a new T7 also, is to tune the suspension for your needs. The riding experience will improve greatly. But instead of buying some super expensive new stuff and replace it, instead I thought that why not use the standard stuff and just have a suspension expert tweak it to your preferences, and that made a lot of difference. I paid about 1,000 euros for it, but still cheaper than buying a whole new kit. And what they did is they took my weight and preferences and everything and changed front and rear springs, revalved it for my weight, and also I think it was some new viscosity for the oil and stuff. They just said, okay, now it's perfect, but not only on one place, but the balance of the bike and everything. Yeah, and it's a different bike now using the standard suspension. And recently my standard indicators, LED indicators I had, they broke because they got water in them. So I got the Cyclops ADV indicators, really rugged stuff and bright. So yeah, and I have changed the whole front, including headlights and everything, to a proper rally tower. Mainly because the standard one, I had the carburetor, it was 1 kilo on top, too much weight, it started shaking. And there's mainly, it goes, the support on the standard bikes goes like an L like this, and in here to the sides. And there's one bolt keeping the whole thing stable, one on each side. And with too much weight on top, the whole thing came loose. So not only did my panel or display shake, but the whole front of the bike started to shake. So I needed something that could hold the weight, but also keep my navigation up high, because that's where I want it. And it looks darn cool. So each of these are 10 watts, and the headlight is an LED for 40 watts, and it really lights it up. These are not shielded like a half beam should be, so I cannot pass inspection with these. No one ever blinked on me or complained, even in dark, but since the light form is round and not shielded, flat on the top, it will not pass inspection. So every other year I remove this and replace it with a standard one. But the guy at the inspection at Dakar, he's actually a follower of the channel. So see you in about 1.5 years, and I've changed it back for you to check. So what do we have more? We have the puppy grips, just foamy grips, really nice, and some Chinese inlays there for heat, which I have made a little switch for here to turn them on. Not particularly good, but they give some heat. The famous Rally Motor Arrow mirrors, really like them. They work great, and I have no problem with with the vision. Here we have the Perun Moto Handlebar clamp, which I use to mount, it's a GoPro mount here, and I use it to mount the drone controller, for instance. And we also have the Scott's steering damper. This is the same product for any bike, but the mount is bike specific. It's the TripleClamp mount, which is the easiest install, because otherwise you have to remove the steering stem into the bearings almost and get that in place. But this only requires the bar risers here to to mount it. I don't have risers on my bike, but yeah, you know what I mean. I do like the steering damper on the T7 for loose, rocky or sandy terrain, because it really calms the handlebar down. There's no damping on the standard T7. So it's really, yeah, it relaxes the shoulders and just makes it easier. So I do like it. It's a lot of money, so it's not sort of a must-have. And I just recently upgraded to the rally seat because my old one got a hole in it, and yeah, it was time for a new. It's 4 centimeters higher, this rally seat. There's also the rally version of T7, which has a 2 centimeter higher than standard seat. But this is, yeah, it's confusing. The rally seat is 4 centimeters. And it's noticeably higher. I can reach both tippy toes, but that's about all. But the paradox here is, for a shorter rider, I would recommend the rally seat, because you will get a much better riding position. If you're long and you have long orangutan arms like I have, with the standard seat, you will end up in the valley down here, further away from the handlebar. But this becomes much more flatter with the higher rally seat. So you really get a better riding position, especially if you're short and have shorter arms. And yeah, you will have a harder time reaching the ground, but you have to just start doing like the enduro guys and slide the butt for everything. And because even with a standard seat or a lowered seat, if you pull over to the road and you need to put the other foot down in order to get the gear in, and there's a decimeter deeper here, doesn't matter if you can flat foot the bike. You need to have a sort of routine to slide off with your butt anyway. So if you're a shorter rider, learn that butt hopping technique and it will save you many times. And for better riding position, get a higher seat. Sounds strange, but that's actually from Patched Bandit, his revelation. Take a look here. Okay, coming around to this side, we have a few interesting things. I have the Camel ADV brake fix, which makes the leverage arm here a bit longer, so you get more pump in here. And the problem is not really that the old brake lever is bad, because this fuel line is not steel braided and it goes all the way up to under the tank to the ABS pump, and then it goes from the ABS pump all the way down and back to the brake caliper here in the rear. So let's say at least 2 meters of hose, and that loses a lot of pressure. I had a friend who just disconnected the ABS and took the hose steel braided from here directly rear, like a 40 centimeter hose with the original brake pedal there, and it was much more distinct than even the brake fix. So it's just a way to get more pump into the system, to get around the spongy feel of the original brake. But yeah, it helps a lot if you don't want to do all that stuff. I have the Camel ADV spiky foot pegs, so many options. I like them. And then the controversial little thing here, which is twin pegs, which when you sit down, let's get on the bike. So when you sit down, you don't touch them. But when you stand up, and they are a bit lower than the main pegs, which means it's easier to get back to a good off-road riding position, and also it's easier to put a lot of more weight on the rear, which is good for sand riding and stuff like that. I like them, both for off-road and for resting, standing up, long days. It's nice to have a big platform like that. I have the Mivv Dakar exhaust system to get it high, and most importantly in, so that a reckless bag just naturally flows over it, so no need for heat protection or anything. And this is still here untouched and actually acts like a little protection for the exhaust. I do need a heat protector here because this dark stain here is from my melting boots. So yeah, I have to sort that. And the rack that I have is really, yeah, minimal, and I think it sort of complements the lines of the bike. I do think that it doesn't look like a big ugly rack, but really follows the design really good. It's from Atelier in Italy, many Italian parts, exhaust, luggage rack and rally tower and bash plate. The Italians know how to do good looking stuff. But I trust the Japanese to make the core of this bike. So yeah, Arnold is the name, link in the description. Arnold Minimal, I think even. Tail Tidy is originally from t7rally.com. However, I was one of the first who bought from them and it broke. I think they fixed something after that, but yeah, Seymour did a copy for me with some more rugged material, and it works well with the indicators also to get clear from the exhaust. So what more do we have? Okay, the side stand, I've changed the spring to Camel ADV stiffer spring, because then it doesn't slam that much when it goes through bumpy stuff. It keeps itself retracted very well. But let's see if I can capture this. Under here, where the side stand comes up, we have the side stand sensor, which enables when the stand is down here and to protect you from riding away when the side stand is down. I removed that. And that's because it's a bit exposed, and if you smash that while riding, you cannot start the bike so easily without some electric work. So instead, I just folded it up here. Here's the sensor. As a little trick, I can disable the whole bike by just turning this half a little turn, and the side stand switch is as if the stand is down and no one can start the bike and ride away at least. Then we have under the saddle some mods. The rally saddle itself has a lot more space underneath here, so I have the extra tube and some tire spoons and gloves and stuff. Okay, inside I have the ThrottlePunks air filter with a little shower cap on to take the worst of the dust and stuff. Then this is oiled and an oiled filter in there also. So normally it's just, I only need to wash this one. And if it's really dusty, sometimes this one. But yeah, it's really protected that way. This is the max configuration, but it did have some transformer stuff going on, so you can make it more open and yeah, like that. I have here the ABS dongle, something I don't know how I could live without. So I have the ABS modes, but mainly also the ABS memory. So I don't have to turn the ABS on and off every time. And that's basically it. Sometimes I use the ODB dongle also from Thork to if I have some engine failure, error codes or anything needs clearing, or just want some data up on the screen with a splitter to the ODB. And yeah, pump and some trail stands and stuff like that. So that's inside. So I think that's it. Let's look at everything. The recommended mods. Let's say I got a new T7 or a buddy of mine, and what would I do as the main things first? And first I would get hand guards, because that's what I think is the most important protection on the bike. If you keep it slim, this is what will take most of the beating, unless you're really unlucky. But also a better bash plate and so on. So those are the things that I protected my bike, and I would do that again. Bash plate, engine cover, hand guards. These plastics actually, not much scratches, but they are a bit broken. But that's not from impacts, that's from me loosening and tightening and loosening and tightening the screws, taking everything on and off during 5 years. So I guess tightening too hard sometimes, and the brittle plastics loses the sort of the nut part of fastening it, the parts that are in the plastics. So yeah, I have some zip ties and stuff on different places. I would change the spring, the rear spring. If I only do one, the cheapest thing to the suspension, that would be to change the spring for my weight, because in the front you cannot adjust anything really without changing springs, but most of the weight is taken on the rear part of the bike. If you had luggage or a passenger or whatever, the rear spring is what really takes the beating there. So, and I noticed the bike being much more controllable and things like that when I changed the rear spring. Then I went through the whole service thing. All right, mirrors, I would change the mirrors to these small ones, or some of these more bendable ones, because the ones that come with the bike are really rigid, and if you hit something, even the fastening, the mounting point is in the same unit as the brake oil reservoir for the front brake, and if you manage to crack something, the whole thing there will go. I didn't hear it happening to someone, but yeah, better mirrors. And I would get the ABS fix, because if you like off-roading, that is quite tiresome, and you forget it and so on. So the ABS memory. Other than that, it's ready to adventure. And everything else is just bling bling and not necessarily what you need, at least to get started. And there are so many parts out there now too. But I have more than I would say that I'd actually need. But I enjoy them, and they are now on the bike in this configuration. I have the stuff that I don't want to take off. The regrets I had with parts, I think, was when I ordered the T7 from the shop and added a lot of extras, like this super heavy 8 kilo luggage rack, and what else did I add? Yeah, the heated grips from Yamaha, which sucked, and so on. So if I were to order a T7 today, I would order it just as it was on the original spec, and then I will use the third-party products out there to do the things that I pinpoint. All right, so now for service and maintenance of this bike, which I now do most of it alone. I do everything on this bike except one thing that is strange that I don't want to do, and that's change spark plugs. because it's a mess to get in there, and also I don't check valve clearances, which basically means that since I think it was 50,000 kilometers or something like that, I stopped taking it to every 10,000 kilometers service to the workshop. Now I only do it every 40,000 kilometers, which means I just recently did that with the valve clearance and stuff, because they get to do that. But everything else, most things are just making sure that everything is as it should, with wear parts. I keep a detailed diary of everything that I do on this bike, because then I can easily see when did I change brake pads last time, how many kilometers do I have on the chain now. This is my third set that I use, and it's good to keep track on how long things last, or perhaps I'm just a nerd. So yes, I have not been over careful with this bike. I've changed the oil every 10,000 kilometers and not much more than that. I rarely oil the chain. On the Turkey trip, it was 11,000 kilometers that trip during 5 weeks, and I oiled the chain once after 6,000 kilometers and then rode home. So, but that chain and sprockets I changed recently after almost 30,000 kilometers, and the sprockets were okay. The chain had gotten a bit sort of stiff in the links, so I changed it. But chain maintenance, I wash it when it's clean with kerosene or WD-40 or something. Just make sure the chain is clean, and when you clean it with those products, it becomes sort of oiled anyway. So, because I don't want a lot of goo on there, so that's what I do mainly. Okay, got questions about the valves. I've done the service with valves 2 times, one at 40,000 kilometers, and there were no change, no need for adjustment. Then again at 80,000 kilometers, and they did adjust the valves. It was 0.07 of a millimeter out of spec, which is just on the sort of fringe there. He said, I don't have to fix it, but it would feel good to just get it within specs again. So yeah, a little valve adjustment there. Bearings. The original bearings that comes with the T7 are not great. They lasted me 26,000 kilometers because they are not sealed on both sides, those bearings. And I was a bit unsensitive with the pressure washer and everything in the beginning. And those bearings actually broke down while riding. I could barely limp to the nearest place to stop, and yeah, I had to come get the bike and fix it. But then I replaced it with some better bearings with seals on both sides. And then after 63,000 kilometers on the Odo, so that would be like 40,000 kilometers, I noticed a little, it doesn't felt as tight. You could wiggle the wheel a little bit, so I didn't notice it when I was riding, but I changed the bearings after 40,000 there. Suspension, I upgraded that after 60,000 kilometers, and there's no maintenance schedule for suspension. But think about it, enduro people, they service the suspensions a lot, many times a year if they're racing, and It is oil, which attracts and sucks up some moisture, and there's moving parts and seals and stuff like that. Of course, that needs to be serviced. And when I took my forks and the rear shock off, sent it into the suspension company, and they serviced it and replaced the wear parts in there. And they said that 60,000 kilometers, it was time to do the service. It wasn't that things have gone bad or anything. It was just a good time for the service to be made. So I guess I will have that in my head every 60,000 kilometers to have them look at it, or perhaps even a little bit earlier. On the other side of the engine, we have the clutch. I did change the clutch plates after 70,000 kilometers, not because I had poor clutch operation or anything, but I was annoyed with a little squeaky sound every time I started the bike cold. It felt like the plates were completely dry or something when it stood for a while, and when I engaged the clutch when riding away, then it's every time the three first uses of the clutch when riding away. So I was curious to look at the plates. Perhaps they weren't oiled or soaked enough and so on. So I had a look, and I bought the stuff and changed the plates, and I have heard a little squeak at some points, but much less and not every time, and clutch works great. The brake discs I have replaced once because you have to choose brake pads that last very long, but they eat up the discs, the sintered pads I think they're called. They eat discs. Or you can use softer organic pads that wear a bit more quickly, but they are a bit more careful on the discs. And I changed the rear one again because you feel on the disc, if you just pinch it and pull outwards, you will feel a little edge. When new, it's just flat, but then the discs eat in, but they leave a little ridge at the end, and you can feel it there. And there are some specs that, if you measure the discs when you find it, it has built a ridge. You can measure it, and it's 4-point-something millimeters. That's the limit there, and below that you should change the discs, and that's quite an easy task. So next chapter is damage and problems that I've had. And I mentioned the plastics, which is not from crashes, but from taking the covers on and off and tightening it too hard. But it's the original plastics on it. The clutch switch, in the clutch there is a little switch, so when you pull the clutch, the bike gets an electric signal also, which means if you have the gear in, pulling the clutch in, you can start the engine. But if you don't have the clutch in, you cannot start the engine if the gear is in. With that clutch switch broken, you cannot start the bike at all, even if you pull the clutch in with the gear in, which is quite annoying if you're going up a hill and you stall the engine and you just want to hit start again, pulling the clutch, but no, you have to go into neutral first before you can start. So I changed that. And then I had oil seal leaking. That could happen at pretty much any time during the bike's life if you get some dirt in there. So I had to change the seal on the fork. I did that and learned how to do that myself, which was a learning experience. The gear sensor is now a bit out of order, and it's a common problem on the CP2 engine. And just behind this little sprocket here, behind this cover, is the gear indicator. And it's just a little electronic thing that has, I think it's 7 cables, one for neutral and one for all the gears. And yeah, it sends a signal to the bike which gear is in right now. So you can see it in the screen and so on. But the common problem is, and it seems to be the gear number 5, that little cable can come loose and from the weld or soled. And the result mainly is that you don't see gear number 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, blank, and then 6. But only after the bike heats up and gets warm. I see the number 5 in the beginning. It cannot be fixed by either replacing the sensor or doing some soldering yourself. I'm not sure I'll do that. But it's not something that bothers me that much at the moment, so I'll leave it. Then after Latvia, I was riding over 80,000 kilometers, this little thing. Do I have to turn the bike around? Yeah, for you guys, I guess I do that. So this here is the O2 sensor, and it goes into the exhaust here, which I have now plugged because this stopped working. And that gives an engine error, an error code that does not go away. So I plugged it. So the O2 sensor is plugged into the exhaust and keeps track of the oxygen level and everything to measure how well the fuel is burnt and sends that to the ECU. And when this malfunctioned, I got an engine error code that, yeah, the yellow light was on. And the new one like this is about 150 euros or more. So yeah, I went for the cheaper option. There's O2 delete, which means you plug that here and you put in something that looks like the end part of this connector, but it has just some resistance there, and you plug it in and it tricks the ECU that everything is okay. So I did that. That was about 15 euros, and yeah, no engine lights or anything. Clutch cable broke after 80,000 also. That was also in Latvia. I had a spare clutch cable, just like this one. I just had an extra one routed. So when that happened, I mean, if the clutch cable goes, it's sort of quite hard to continue riding. There are ways, I guess, but if you have a second clutch cable routed, it's a 5-minute job. Just disconnect this one, connect the new spare one, and go riding again. So that happened, and I guess that's it. That's the full review, and I have some Q&A also, questions from viewers. So if you have the time, I'll read them. Could the T7 be a real one life motorcycle? And I guess that means, could you have this as the only motorcycle in your life? Yes, of course, it's been what I've been using. And as mentioned, I'm still keeping it. The place where I bought it from, just nearby, Bike in Trollhättan, they want it back after 100,000 kilometers just to pull the engine apart or open it up and look at all the stuff. So those questions that is about camshafts and the health of the engine after 100,000 kilometers, that will be my next review with a full look into the engine. Hopefully that will be next season. Yeah, what would it take for you to replace the T7? And if you were at Yamaha designing team, what would your inputs for the next T7 be? I don't know. I would replace it with a T7, I think, because I know I like riding it. The engine power and everything is just enough for me. And I guess just some small things that would keep it even more safe. For instance, get rid of the loose plastic, the brittle plastics, have something more softer that doesn't break as easily. This here exhaust hanger is a known old design flaw where it's welded to the frame. Hit it hard and you can get cracks in the frame, but and yeah, just small stuff. It's more important that they keep the recipe than change too much. How is the rust on the bike? The only rust I have now, initially the first 10-20,000 kilometers I had rust under the tank a little bit. I treated that quite early and nothing else is rusting except for some bolts. They get rust inside. Would you prefer a less powerful and lighter bike? Yes, not necessarily less powerful, but lighter bike. I love this bike for everything down to when it becomes technical, because it is a heavy, quite top heavy bike, and it doesn't matter one single bit when you're blasting through gravel roads and dirt roads, but when it becomes technical and you get sort of into the balancing act and or in deep sand and stuff like that, it's a heavy bike. Actually, in Latvia, in that technical terrain, I made the decision to order a lighter complement to this bike. A strange guy from Bergen, Thomas Hansen, something like that. Knowing you have changed your suspension, but an idea how bad or good the oil is in the suspension is something I'm really curious about. Actually, I have no idea, Thomas. I had the original oil and everything up to 60,000 kilometers, and they didn't complain about things being bad, so probably okay. Probably not the best stuff the market can offer in terms of oil, but don't worry. Ground clearance, is it enough? I hit some rocks under here sometimes, but I mean, I'm not doing Romaniacs with the bike. I forgot to mention, I have the ThrottlePunks ECU fixed there also. So together with the ECU, the air filter and the exhaust, I have about 7 extra horsepower, which makes 80 horsepower in this bike. Do I notice it? Not anymore. It's like a pay raise. You're happy the first month and then that's the new normal. So it's fun. It's yeah, it was a fun upgrade in a way. Not very noticeable now, although it is measurable. If you had to choose one bike for a 10,000 kilometer trip around the world, well, it doesn't take you around the world 10,000 kilometers, but let's say I want to go on a huge trip and do all the maintenance myself without any mechanical support. I wouldn't be afraid to take the T7, because it would quite easily take me around there without any trouble. Otherwise, I would go on a smaller bike, which is a bit easier to maintain with spark plugs and stuff like that. Perhaps something like Itchy Boots, the Tenere 700 would be, yeah, retro bike would be fun. Total cost of ownership. I have no idea. That's how it works. You buy stuff, you toss the receipts. No one needs to know, not even you or your wife. But for a service, the most I've paid for a service on this bike was the 80,000 kilometers service at the workshop, not only with valve inspection, but also with valve adjustment, which is extra, of course. Only the inspection is normally in the price. I paid about 580 euros, and that's the most I ever paid. Normally before that, around 300, 400 euros for the services. Here's a question, can it do wheelies? I think so, at least on the rear wheel. I can lift it, but I cannot maintain it. He said, comparison with the World Raid T7, the larger version, I don't have much experience with it, but I've sat on it and then I stepped off it because I do not like bikes like the Africa Twin where the tank just goes out like a Dolly Parton in front of you. And yeah, and I got that feeling with many new bikes now with large tanks and stuff like that, like the World Raid T7. It just feels so big there, and I like the slimness of the T7. It has 16 liters, and I never ran out of fuel, even in the remote parts of Turkey, and I'm not planning to go to Mongolia or through some desert anytime soon. And if I do, I can bring a fuel bladder or something. So, not really interested. And I'm not the bike reviewer guy that rides every bike that I can come over. I only ride bikes that interests me. I'd like to have that bike. So I wouldn't go reviewing the 1300 GS, for instance, because that's not on my radar. Would I buy another one? Yeah, I'm a Yamaha guy. If this one, for some reason, was not available to me anymore and I go out and buy a new bike, I think I would buy the T7 Extreme. Same bike, just with better suspension. And yeah, let's see what, I'm a bit curious about what the 2025 model of T7 will look like, because it looks like they are doing some changes to the bike. So I'll be interested in that. Not for an upgrade, but just intellectual curiosity. How tall am I? I'm 180 centimeters, that's 5'10". And for shorter riders, how will it work? And I mentioned that earlier. Yeah, you might not reach the ground, but there are techniques for that you should learn. And actually, the higher seat is a better riding position. But I guess there are better bikes for short people, like the CF Moto 450 MT. I tried that. Feels very much like the T7, only smaller. That's that. That's my T7. Love riding it. Would buy again. Not paid by Yamaha. Shame on you. I sold a few T7s, don't you think? But yeah, love it. Not a problem in the world, worth mentioning with the bike, and I can't wait to go out riding again. And I do have a smaller bike coming, but my wife has a Shetland pony to accompany her big horse, so it doesn't have to be alone. And that's how I sold it to her, that I will get a Shetland pony also to my T7. It's not that small, but I will use that for the more challenging and shorter radius events, I guess. Are you still here? I'm very impressed and thankful. Thanks for watching. If I didn't answer anything that you were curious about, write in the comments. I tried to get all the links to all the stuff in there, so I hate goodbyes, but I guess this is it. See you next time. Ciao.